On this Saturday night, bursting the balloon, America takes action.
I told them to shoot down.
A U.S. fighter jet takes out China's balloon, but what was it looking for? The investigation begins.
China's not a country to be trifled with.
Cold alerts keep coming when milder weather is finally on the way.
We're getting up to 95% recoverable material.
Electric cars creating a new kind of waste. The Canadian company taking charge and coming up with solutions.
I want to have my own spot with like this whole, it's going to be like a dog Disneyland type thing.
A bus ride and a park. It's the staff of dreams for dogs and their owners.
Global National with Farah Nasser.
Good evening to you, and thanks for joining us. We begin with developing news out of the U.S. and a critical moment in U.S.-China relations. This afternoon, the U.S. military shot down a suspected Chinese surveillance balloon as it made its way off the coast of South Carolina.
Just shot it, dude. They shot it.
Recovery of the balloon is now underway, and an investigation will soon begin into its mission. Washington says it was sent to monitor strategic sites in the continental United States and is a clear violation of U.S. sovereignty. China is still insisting the object was a weather balloon blown off course. The giant balloon, about the size of 3 school buses, had been floating across the U.S. for the past few days after making its way over Canada. Canada's Minister of National Defence says Ottawa unequivocally supports America's actions and that the government has been closely engaged with its U.S. counterparts. The order to shoot down the balloon given by the president marks a tangible escalation in tensions between the U.S. and China, and it comes just days before what was supposed to be a diplomatic meeting between the two superpowers. So the question now, what happens next? Jennifer Johnson reports.
After the suspected Chinese surveillance balloon spent days crossing parts of Canada and the United States, the U.S. military took action, shooting it down moments after it moved past the North Carolina coast.
They decided that the best time to do that was we got over water outside within the 12-mile limit.
The Department of Defense says it had already weakened the balloon surveillance capabilities earlier this week. It's believed to have traveled near sensitive military sites across North America, including U.S. intercontinental missile silos in Montana.
We have to send a very clear signal to China that this is unacceptable.
China claims it was a meteorological balloon that drifted off course, and it never intended to violate another country's airspace. But now a second suspected Chinese balloon has been spotted over Latin America. Experts say it was launched the same week the U.S. announced new military bases in the Philippines, 160 kilometers from Taiwan.
I can only imagine what the reaction would be in China if they were on the other end.
Blinken canceled this weekend's trip to China as tensions escalate, but Beijing claims no formal visit was ever announced. President Biden was advised by military leaders not to shoot down the balloon while it was over populated areas, fearing falling debris could harm citizens. But some Republicans disagreed with waiting.
We're talking about defending our sovereign airspace, and I don't think the Chinese Communist Party would hesitate to shoot down an American asset that was in their airspace.
The Pentagon says there's no evidence the balloon was carrying any nuclear or radioactive materials, but exactly what information was collected and what technology was on board won't be known until the debris is recovered. President Biden is spending the rest of the weekend at Camp David and will be speaking with top military leaders to get some answers. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
The balloon is also raising concerns over our national security and the future of U.S.-Canada relations with China, especially ahead of U.S. President Joe Biden's visit to our country next month. On this week's edition of the West Block, our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson sat down with U.S. Ambassador to Canada, David Cohen, to discuss the threats China poses. Here's just some of what he had to say.
I know that you are briefed on intelligence and security. You're a close friend of the president. Canadians are looking at this and they're concerned, and so are Americans. What can you tell us about the incident in terms of the significance that the Chinese are actually flying a balloon over North America with intelligence gathering capabilities?
So I think it's a reminder of the need for us to be vigilant, the need for us to fund an adequate defense, the need for us to have an adequate technological defense. I think it's a reminder of the importance of NORAD to continental defense for both Canada and the United States. On the other hand, let's not jump out of our shoes here. I mean, this is a balloon that was at very high altitude. My information is that there was never no American citizens or buildings were ever in jeopardy for this. The balloons were well above commercial airliner flight patterns, and this is not the first time that this type of a device has been floated over the United States. It has happened previously.
So then, is this maybe more about China sending a message? We can do it if we want to, than what it's actually gathering in terms of intelligence?
So I hate to speculate what China's motivations will be. And you notice their public comment, of course, is that it's gathering weather data and it drifted off course. I'm not sure I believe that it's gathering weather data, but it's entirely possible that it drifted off course and that there's never any intention to have it flying over, this part of the United States. But I don't want to speculate about what China's up to. I'm happy to comment, though, that this really should be a reinforcement for all of us, for our public, that China is not a country to be trifled with. They are a legitimate threat to the United States and Canada from a military perspective, from a defense perspective, from an intelligence perspective, and from a trade perspective. And I think it underscores the reasons for sound and consistent policies by both Canada and the United States toward China.
You can catch Mercedes' full interview with the U.S. ambassador to Canada tomorrow, right here on Global. Extreme cold, blizzards, and snow, all words synonymous with the Canadian winter. But conditions this past week and weekend have been severe, with many parts of the country remaining under public weather alerts. On Friday, parts of the country saw temperatures dip to -35. And although some regions are experiencing more seasonable temperatures today, warnings from Environment Canada are in place across the Maritimes, Ontario, and Quebec. Mike Drolet reports on how Canadians are coping in this cold.
When you can see the cold air in the harbor, it's a good idea to stay inside, unless it's a visual too dramatic to pass up.
With the wind, it's probably in the -30s. It's a great day to be out. And if you have the clothing, it's a great day to be out and see the scenery, see the harbor on a really cold day.
They call it sea smoke when the Arctic air mixes directly above the warmer harbor water. A similar scene played out in St. John, New Brunswick, where a wind chill dipping into the -40s left the streets eerily calm. But the frigid temperatures crept indoors for some, with many in the Maritimes experiencing the brunt of the polar vortex in the dark. More than 30,000 customers were without power at one point in the region today.
We're making the investments.
In Nova Scotia, the extreme cold came days after the Utility Review Board approved a 14% hike to electrical bills, despite the province urging the independent body to reconsider.
I'm surprised that they thumbed their nose at Nova Scotians the way they did, to be honest.
In Quebec, where 80% of homes are heated by electricity, the provincial utility is pleading with homeowners to conserve energy after setting usage records the last 2 days. The cold snap was so extreme, the start of Quebec City's carnival was delayed until Saturday afternoon. Winterlude in Ottawa was similarly affected, but oddly enough, even with the cold, the Rideau Canal has still yet to open. The latest delay seen since the National Capital Commission started clearing the ice in 1971. The polar vortex reached well into the U.S. as well, with New Hampshire's Mount Washington, the highest peak in the northeastern U.S., setting temperature records with wind chills touching -77 Celsius. But at least the system is nearing its end. Toronto was miserable with cold on Friday.
It's disgusting. I don't like it.
But Saturday saw a gradual thaw and a return to a normal winter. Mike Drolet, Global News, Toronto.
Dozens of Russian and Ukrainian prisoners of war have returned home following a prisoner swap. A top Ukrainian presidential aide says 116 Ukrainians were freed, including troops who held out in Mariupol, while the city was reduced to ruins. Russian defense officials say 63 of its troops have returned following the swap, including some whose release was secured after mediation by the United Arab Emirates. A state of catastrophe remains in place in Chile after an intense wildfire continues to spread throughout the country's southern and central regions. The fires, fueled by a heat wave that saw temperatures hit 38 degrees Celsius, are responsible for the deaths of at least 13 people, some of whom died while trying to escape the flames. Although hundreds of fires have been contained, the forecast for the coming days remains risky. That's according to updates provided by the government. The family of a BC police officer who died by suicide 4 years ago says a coroner's inquest decision this week has brought them a sense of justice. Constable Nicole Chan took her life after filing complaints about 2 senior officers having inappropriate relationships with her. Now a jury has made 12 recommendations for the BC government and Vancouver police to prevent another tragedy from happening. Neetu Garcha reports, and we want to warn you first that the story contains some disturbing details.
She would be very happy that she's finally listened to.
Jen Chan reacting with a sense of relief after a BC coroner's inquest into her sister's death by suicide made 12 recommendations following 7 days of testimony.
Things did need to be changed, and we're very satisfied in the fact that, you know, other people also think so, and hopefully it will be, you know, put into action. Yeah.
Constable Nicole Chan took her own life in January of 2019 after she made formal complaints about sexual assault and extortion against a supervisor, and a night after she was apprehended under the Mental Health Act. She had been a member of the Vancouver Police Department for nearly a decade.
We heard that in her last moments at the hospital that she really just felt like nobody was listening to her.
The jury heard Chan struggled with severe depression and PTSD after alleged inappropriate relationships with Human Resources Officer Sergeant Dave Van Patten and Supervisor Sergeant Greg McCullough. Among the 12 recommendations aimed at preventing a similar tragedy, mandatory, rigorous and regular in-person respectful workplace training for all officers, annual psychological check-ins, and mandatory psychological interviews as part of the recruitment process.
The whole point of the inquest was to show that Nicole never wanted to be a victim. She found herself in that way, and how can we help her stop being a victim?
Chan was released from hospital an hour and 20 minutes after being triaged. Hours later, she was found hanged from her bedroom door. The jury's recommendation for Vancouver General Hospital: the treating doctor should have direct communication with first responders and family members, and for the Ministry of Health to maintain a database of patients with suicidal ideation.
Ultimately provided us with answers to expose the many shortcomings of the various institutions that Nicole came in contact with.
Vancouver police say Chan's death highlights the importance of conversations about mental health and accountability in policing. Her family remains hopeful for positive change within the force and the systems meant to support its members. Neetu Garcha, Global News, Vancouver.
If you or someone that you know needs help, you can call Talk Suicide Canada at 1-833-456-4566. Support's available 24 hours a day, every day of the year. A generational divide. Coming up, why there's a gap in education levels between new and third generation Black Canadians. Data from the latest census is giving us a picture of education levels among ethnic groups across the country. Overall, racialized groups in Canada tend to be highly educated. Among Black Canadians, about a third have a bachelor's degree or higher, which is the same as Canada's population as a whole. But the differences are quite stark when you look at Black Canadians who have recently immigrated to Canada and those who have lived here for generations. Kyle Benning explains.
Some fish are spiny.
A number of factors go into succeeding at school. Family can play a big part of that. Chris Thompson's parents moved to Canada from the Caribbean. He says he wouldn't have attended the University of Toronto if it wasn't for the people around him.
I was fortunate to be connected and met mentors that push me further than just sports.
For Canada's black population, family background can determine the likelihood of success at a post-secondary institution. That, according to 2021 census data recently released by Statistics Canada. About a third of Canada's black population will receive a bachelor's degree, which is in line with Canada's population as a whole. But within that group, there are clear differences.
When you break things down, what you see is that the black population includes some very highly educated groups, as well as some with much lower levels of education.
The report puts the black population into three groups: African immigrants and their children, Caribbean immigrants and their children, and black families who have lived in the country for several generations. The data shows more than 40% of African immigrants and their children leave university with at least a bachelor's degree. About 20% of Caribbean immigrants reach this milestone, while just short of 30% of their children receive a bachelor's degree. But for families who lived in Canada a little longer, only 15% achieve a bachelor's degree. More than half don't have any post-secondary credentials. York University professor Carl James has written a handful of books looking into education and heritage. He says the drive from immigrant families for their children to succeed is drilled into them, with the children recognizing the sacrifice made by their parents.
When is that moment, the magic moment?
James adds while familial support is vital, encouragement or lack of it from teachers can play a major factor for racialized kids who go through Canada's K-12 system.
And sometimes if you have these ideas about the students you're teaching, that will influence how you think and how you work with the students.
He notes seeing people of the same heritage succeed at higher levels of academia and in careers also makes a difference. It's something Thompson and the Federation of Black Canadians are looking to change by offering the mentorship he received to students today.
You're hearing it, but the reality of it is when you're going out into the community, you're not seeing that. You're not exposed to those people. So it might stunt the message from the reality of where they drift to.
Kyle Benning, Global News.
Ahead, the scrap yards of the future, how electric cars are creating a whole new recycling industry. With gas prices remaining high, Canadians are looking for ways to cut their emissions, and electric vehicles are becoming the preferred choice for many. Sales of electric vehicles skyrocketed last year, increasing by 75% worldwide. But innovation brings with it new questions, like what happens to the car's massive battery pack when it dies. Krista Hesse sought out to find the answer to that question this week for The New Reality and discovered a Canadian company on a mission to make sure those batteries don't go to waste.
Batteries power the technology that we rely upon every day. Our phones, laptops, and increasingly our cars. Inside each electric vehicle are large batteries containing precious minerals such as lithium, cobalt, and nickel. When EV batteries run out of juice, some are sent here to Li-Cycle's Kingston facility, where they are broken down and recycled. Li-Cycle is part of a new industry that is emerging to meet the growing demand for electric vehicles and the minerals that are needed for their batteries.
So there's a big worry, how are we going to supply all the lithium, the nickel, the cobalt to make all these batteries?
Here, the battery packs are submerged in a water-based chemical solution and then shredded. The black mass that is produced contains all the valuable minerals that lithium-ion batteries need. It's then shipped off to be processed into raw materials that can be used to make new batteries.
So we're getting up to 95% recoverable material from those batteries.
Last year, electric vehicle batteries made up 40 to 50% of all the batteries Li-Cycle processed. That number is expected to increase come 2030, when hundreds of thousands of EVs are expected to reach their end of life. The hope is recycling can help to offset the amount of mining that's needed to create these batteries in the first place, helping to power a clean energy future. Farah?
Krista, thank you for that. And you can watch the full story tonight on The New Reality coming up at 7 p.m. Next, canine commute. Why this Calgary school bus has gone to the dogs. If you have a dog who loves car rides and just can't wait to frolic at the dog park, then an Alberta family has created a unique business just for you. An entrepreneurial mom and her son in Calgary bought a bus, Not for people, though, for taking pet pooches to and from the park. Now, it's a simple concept, but the results are absolutely adorable. Jill Croteau went along for the ride.
When this school bus hits the suburbs, it's not pulling up to pick up kids. Hello. It's coming to the doors of parents to take their fur babies for a ride.
Come on, buddy.
It's about as adorable as you'd expect.
Oh, it is a dream job, yeah. Can't really get much better than hanging out with dogs all day. I grew up with dogs, so I've always loved dogs. I train dogs on the side, and I mean, dogs are a little bit better than people in my books.
Denzel Morrison and his mom, who runs a rescue, transformed a bus into a doggy daycare, equipping it with harnesses to keep the dogs safely leashed in, small gates between the seats keep them contained, and if there's any misbehaving...
Treats. Lots of treats. Treats is the key.
Once they're all picked up, the passengers settle in for their final destination, and they can hardly wait.
It'd probably be like some Secret Life of Pets stuff where they're like, holy crap, just get me off this bus, actually. I just want to go to the park.
They're released into a private gated park where they can run wild.
Oh, I know.
Their owners are sure satisfied with the service. An exhausted pup brings some peace to the home.
Having a new puppy and 2 young kids, I was looking for creative ways to have a little bit of help. And as I was searching around the neighborhood, I just came across it online, and it, I mean, honestly, it seemed kind of fake at first. It's so hilarious.
Oh, you're gonna get tangled up. Morrison hopes to build on the business and expand to all of Calgary's quadrants.
I want to have my own spot with like this whole, it's going to be like a dog Disneyland type thing. And then I'll have maybe 1 or 2 buses, and I can just like bring dogs from all over the city to my own area and like have it like just really awesome.
I think his canine customers would really like that. Jill Croteau, Global News.
And as he said, treats are the key. That's Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Farah Nasser, and on behalf of our whole crew here on Global National, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your evening with us. Tonight's Dear Canada, here it is. It's snowy Little River Reservoir in St. John, New Brunswick. We love seeing your Canada, so please email us those photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Until we're together tomorrow, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Good night.